The statutory limit on public debt clause in U.S. Budget Control Acts are an important threshold and restriction. How important is this debt limit? It is the most important vulnerability in American government and society today. I have discovered a chain of letters from the Treasury Secretaries of the USA to the Congress over the past 14 years. They are shocking in their candidness and relay a situation in America that is alarming. What led to this discovery is in early April 2024 I read the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It was an interesting read. There have been additional acts pertaining to the Federal Reserve since 1913. I have not read those. Also, I bought and read the first few chapters of Ron Paul's In the Fed in 2009. So I decided to finish up In the Fed after finishing the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. Ron Paul does a good job outlining the problems of the Federal Reserve. Although I did not go into reading In the Fed, inspecting for the absence of the statutory limit on public debt clause, I do not recall that being mentioned throughout In the Fed. Statutory limit on public debt is a real threshold. In order for the debt to rise, that threshold has to be expanded beforehand. In other words, before the U.S. Treasury can continue to give Treasury bonds to the Federal Reserve in exchange for Federal Reserve notes, the debt limit has to be raised by Congress. That is an eye-opener, a major realization. The Federal Reserve is not the problem. The Federal Reserve is a mere tool. Now say this phrase in a few different inflections. The USA should never exceed $1 trillion in public debt. The USA should never exceed $1 trillion in public debt. The USA should never exceed $1 trillion in public debt. Ruminate on that statement. On the face of it, it sounds fairly prudent, right? 1 trillion? Still, 1 trillion is a lot. Did your synapses ever flicker over to, why would the USA ever need to be 1 trillion in public debt? Ever. Keep that number in mind as the following information is revealed throughout this video. Here is how that limit was expressed in the 110th Congress Rules for House of Representatives. That's subsection B of section 3101 of Title 31 United States Code is amended by striking out the dollar limitation contained in such subsection and inserting in lieu thereof, with the blank being filled with the dollar limitation equal to the appropriate level of the public debt. So there it is. There is a blank line. Somebody has to write the number in, and if they want a new number, they strike it out and they write in the new number. Some human being, presumably an American citizen, had to do the actual striking out and inserting of the new amount. I wonder if that person quietly shook his head while doing the thing. Here is another one from the Federal Register and the journals. When they amended by striking out the dollar limitation contained in such subsection and inserting in lieu thereof 14,294 billion. Wow. In 2010 they set the limit to 14,294 billion. What is the current public debt in 2024, just 14 years later? The U.S. debt clock has here that it's at 34 trillion, coming up on 35 trillion. That is a lot of debt, much more than 1 trillion. And this is kind of interesting down here, this tooltip. It lists two other ways that we could have debt-free interest notes. The greenbacks from the Civil War and President Kennedy's silver certificates. And there are other ways. Heck, you could put 1 ounce of silver in And if you want um, a monetary system with $40 trillion, since silver is on the periodic table of elements, divide 40 trillion by however many atoms are in an ounce of silver. And so e-money and paper money are not the problems. It's the peg and what is the quality of the money. So the U.S. debt clock has us at 34 trillion. And from 2010, they set the debt limit at 14 trillion, which means pretty much that if we have that much debt, that they're going to print that much money and have it in circulation. That is an increase of $20 trillion in 14 years. Just 2010 to 2024, $20 trillion, or 144% increase of the money supply. What great thing happened that the USA should be so flush with a 144% increase in money? Then there is this link from the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, and this states that on December 16, 2021, lawmakers raised the debt limit by 2.5 trillion to a total of 31.4 trillion. And that is about a year and 4 months ago. On January 19th, 2023, the limit was reached, and the Treasury announced a debt issuance suspension period during which, under current law, it can take well-established extraordinary measures. If we were living in a third world country, those would probably be called merciless extraordinary measures to borrow additional funds without breaching the debt ceiling. So right now we have a debt ceiling, and they are pulling shenanigans called merciless extraordinary measures to get around that, and that is why we have a debt ceiling that is one number and a national debt that is higher. Eventually they will get around to raising the debt limit, and it will encompass that and be a little bit higher to keep that carrot out in front of us. Okay. Today there are 4 common reasons that necessitate an increase in a nation's money supply. Before Keynes and the deep state, what the communists call the class dictatorship, just the increase in people and product and services necessitated the increase in the money supply. If you have a bunch more people or a bunch more products and services coming into play, you need money, and to keep the currency moving things along. But now there are 4 common reasons. The increase in people, just some quick stats here. From 1980 to 2024, there's been a 53% increase. And since 2010, there has been a 10% increase, with, I suspect, a lot of people coming over through the southern border. So a 10% increase and a 144% increase in the money supply. That doesn't add up why all that money is being inserted into our monetary system. Increase in products and services is another one we talked about. And then with Keynes, starting in the 1920s and the 1940s, the government needs more money to finance government spending. Guns, butter, and everything in between. And this also props up sales in the private sector. Everyone loves a government contract. So all them treasury bonds that get sent to the Federal Reserve, where do those Federal Reserve notes come back to? They come back to the government. They don't come back to us, except through the contracts and the guns and butter programs. And then over the years, there is another facet, off the books and unaccountable, like the $1 trillion that went missing the day before 9/11, Black Ops, DARPA, some of the military bases, rounding errors, routinely billions of dollars get left off just through the high numbers and rounding up the math, disappearing funds. So I don't even know how you can have accurate accounting and know whether you're reaching a debt limit by hundreds of billions when there are trillions going missing. So on the whole accounting is extremely shady. So, having read the Federal Reserve Act and in the Fed, out of curiosity, I started looking for how many times this debt limit has been raised and to what amount. I did not find an easy to reference list. However, I did find the below link, which has the letters between the Treasury Department and Congress concerning the debt limit. And that would be this web page. U.S. Department of Treasury, starting in 2020 or ending in 2023. All of these PDFs are Treasury sending letters back to Congress, going back to 2011. And this spans Obama's presidencies, Trump presidencies, and Biden's presidency. So, Democrat and Republican, and multiple Treasury Secretaries. So there is an overall theme established. I opened a couple of those letters and read them. On the third one, I came across this paragraph, and it is down here, the material of what we're going to be going over today. This is like a little food prep before we get to actually the main course. So on the third PDF I opened, I came across this paragraph. It must be understood that the nation's creditworthiness is not a bargaining chip or a hostage that can be taken to advance any political agenda. It is an essential underpinning of our strength as a nation. Threatening to undermine our creditworthiness is no less irresponsible than threatening to undermine the rule of law, and no more legitimate than any other common demand for ransom. Timothy Geithner, January 4th, 2013. Now, just as an American citizen, just reading that from the Treasury Secretary to Congress, and those words being used, that was I mean, you could just read that and just take it for what it is, but this is business. This is a whole government, the USA, Pax Americana, and the Treasury Secretary is saying that, using words like hostage, ransom, and saying that the whole greatness is based on creditworthiness. So that really got my attention, and it led to the creation of this video. I downloaded every single PDF from that web page and read them, condensing the interesting points, determining themes, harvesting phrases, and analyzing what is being said. The Treasury Secretaries over the past few executive administrations have been explicitly warning Congress of a key vulnerability in the USA, a vulnerability which, if abandoned, will amount to bypassing the checks and balances the Constitution establishes. And just a quick look, there are all the letters, and having read them, let's see, there they are. Having read them, I went through and culled out interesting paragraphs to also establish themes from letter to letter to letter to letter. Alright. So, I did not find an easy, just like a table of this was the debt limit and this is what it was raised to. But there are charts out there on the internet And here you can see this chart's got some debt ceilings marked from like 2014, 2016. And this is another trend, another theme. It's the debt ceiling is always being raised up, up, up. And that's a kind of a deficiency in the English language because that's a negative number. The debt limit is a negative number, and words like up and raise the debt limit, those have a positive connotation. So raise the debt limit. It should be um, in, I don't know, decrease the debt limit, but it does require you have some understanding and your wits about you when talking about this stuff. Here's another chart, and here also gives you a look of how it spans from Democrats to Republicans through their presidencies. These are Republicans, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, and then you had Trump was a Republican, and you have Biden, which is a Democrat. So this is a United States problem. This is not a party problem. And this is a fairly new one, up to 2022. This has our national debt at 31 trillion 457 billion. Now, remember up there at the beginning where we said, should the United States ever be 1 trillion in debt? What the heck are we doing 31 trillion in debt? All right. The debt limit is the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, including Social Security and Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. That's interesting. They collect taxes from us, which assumedly is 100% of, that they get the whole amount. And then a portion of that is to be refunded to us. So they tax us, and then they have to borrow in order to get money to give us our refunds. There's just something not kosher, not right about that at all. Interesting that an effort has been made to post all of those letters on those web pages, but nothing has been added since 7/28/23. And here it is, 6/23/2024, almost a year later. It makes a person wonder why this avenue of information has gone barren. What's going on in the Treasury Department that they would no longer be sending letters to Congress? Maybe they are, and they just haven't posted on the web page. Also on Microsoft Bing and Google, you can do a quick search, and the information, see, I pulled that up, and this I think is what they call Copilot. This is 2024, and you know how the search engines are pretty good about bringing up pertinent information, timely information. But here, and also on Google, that's another search engine, the top results are old. Here we get one that is close, and I believe I've used this link. That's 31 trillion.4 trillion. So it's kind of odd that the information has went barren on 2023, and also that the results are seemingly old. So how does the Treasury Department view the debt limit? In short, the language in the letters is comprised of soft threats and soft begging. It is hard to dispel the mental image of the Treasury Secretary asking Congress, please, 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 can't we have access to more debt and Federal Reserve notes? It won't go well for you if you say no. This would not be a stretch, considering Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson knelt on one knee before Nancy Pelosi in 2008, asking for Congress to allow the Treasury to go more into debt. This brings up a point that I think the vast majority of American citizens have heard, that Congress has the power of the purse. They decide what money will be spent. And these letters make that very, very clear. Since the Treasury Secretary serves under the President, and the Treasury Secretary is the person officially begging Congress to raise the debt limit, the President is not a predominant presence in these letters. Congress basically holds the future of the USA in its hands. All they have to do is vote no one time, and as these letters state, things will get very hard in the USA. This link in the New York Times quotes the current Treasury Secretary, Ms. Yellen. While the debt limit was created to make government run more smoothly, many policymakers believe that it has become more trouble than it's worth. In 2021, Ms. Yellen said she supported abolishing the debt limit. That would allow the executive department with all the alphabet soup agencies to fund whatever they want without congressional approval. Imagine your favorite alphabet soup agency getting as much money as they ever wanted to become more of a presence in free Americans' lives. Now imagine that same capability for your least favorite alphabet soup agency. And note, the debt limit critical threshold and restriction has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. This is about accurate accounting, responsible fiscal policy, and the separation of powers in our republic. This is so critical that if the debt limit is abolished, I do believe this will officially be the end of the constitutional republic and a transition to the imperial phase of the USA. Serious, if the executive department can just create money as it wants without a debt limit and not being responsible to Congress, we might as well just do away with the Constitution. And at some point, treason has to come into the conversation. I'm going to be tough in my critique of what has been harvested from these letters. Here's the criteria I will be using to justify the hard, acerbic criticism I will be applying to these letters. I am not just arbitrarily and superficially picking on and criticizing these letters. The power paradigm, I don't subscribe to the right wing, left wing. I subscribe to the state of nature, to authoritarianism. This is a very good example of why references to left and right wing cloak fiscal irresponsibility, as you saw from those charts. And as you will see in the following extracts from the letters, what are called conservatives are just as guilty as socialists, Republicans, and Democrats. Next, Nicomachean ethics. Some things are extreme or defective. Everything can't be called good and stuffed into the golden mean intermediate. In these letters, consider what is being said and whether the topic hits the extreme, golden mean, or defective. And this paragraph from Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, on overtrading. I'm going to read this very quickly to get through it, but it is important to understand. No complaint, however, is more common than that of a scarcity of money. Money, like wine, must always be scarce with those who have neither wherewithal to buy it nor credit to borrow it. Those who have either will seldom be in want either of the money or of the wine which they have occasion for. This complaint, however, of the scarcity of money is not always confined to improvident spendthrifts. It is sometimes general through a whole mercantile town and the country in its neighborhood. Overtrading is the common cause of it. Sober men whose projects have been disproportionate to their capitals are as likely to have neither wherewithal to buy money nor credit to borrow it, as prodigals whose expense has been disproportionate to their revenue. Before their projects can be brought to bear, their stock is gone and their credit with it. They run about everywhere to borrow money, and everyone tells them that they have none to lend. Even such general complaints as the scarcity of money do not always prove that the usual number of gold and silver pieces are not circulating in the country, but that many people want those pieces have nothing to give for them. When the profits of trade happen to be greater than ordinary, overtrading becomes a general error, both among great and small dealers. Overtrading becomes a general error. They do not always send more money abroad than usual, but they buy upon credit, both at home and abroad, an unusual quantity of goods, which they send to some distant market in hopes that the returns will come in before the demand for payment. The demand comes before the returns, and they have nothing at hand with which they can purchase money or give solid security for borrowing. It is not any scarcity of gold and silver, but the difficulty which such people find in borrowing, and which their creditor find in getting payment, that occasions the general complaint of the scarcity of money. So, in our current monetary system, not only are we 1 trillion in debt, we are over 34 trillion in debt, and it's all on borrowing, issuing treasury bonds. So we don't have a scarcity of money, but it's the quality of what we're using as money that is very dangerous. When good business is being conducted, there is a threshold where trade based too much on borrowing becomes the liability of over trading. It would be mind-numbingly obtuse to point out that since our entire monetary system is based on debt borrowing, that we might be over trading in America. We might be living beyond our means. Do you think? And the Bible calls for accurate scales and avoiding debt, let alone the immorality of creating an entire monetary system based on debt. Needless to say, what the Treasury Secretaries over the past 15 years have been saying to Congress won't look good considering the above criteria. That being said, let's review what is being said. No hyperbole involved. From their own words, the future on the USA depends on the results from these letters. This also is the first video, and these next 3 are more of the same thing, and I've broken it out by theme: statutory debt limit, what's being said, debt issuance suspension, government business, extraordinary measures, that would be merciless extraordinary measures. And so I'm going to have more videos coming on these. Here we have borrowing, taxing, full faith and credit. They really harp on that. Treasury making Congress aware that this is all based on the full faith and credit. They know what they're doing. Make no mistake about it. They are doing all this based on the full faith and credit. The credit worthiness, taxes, what default would mean, what restoration, and oddly enough, there are the two entities that Treasury most brings up by far, as far as the debt limit and what restoration will mean and what they're not going to be able to fund. They don't bring up social programs so much. They don't bring up the military-industrial complex. What they bring up is the Civil Service Retirement Fund, and also pertaining to the Postal Accountability and their fund. That's what that F stands for right there. Which, in a way, kind of makes sense. If all the federal employees up there are part of a class dictatorship, the deep state, they are going to be entirely self-interested with their paychecks and their pensions. So that is revealing. They are front and center, the civil service, as far as getting that debt limit raised so they can get some money. And parties, the amounts involved, like I said, in 2010 it was at 14 trillion, and now 14 years later we're dealing with 34 trillion. The amounts involved, prioritization was a theme around 2013. Um, Asset sales, prioritization is what should we pay first, basically. And Treasury shot that down big time. Asset sales, selling all of our military bases and all of our things. Treasury didn't want that as an option. Treasury bonds and money. And I'm going to read these two letters in as their own videos because they paint a professional synopsis of what Treasury is telling Congress. And this one, I have some some movie clips of just people generally talking, and how all of this, in order to be coherent, you have to talk a certain way and use certain words. And these are videos of people, popular newscasts, and the words that they use, and just some commentary on that. And then the last one will be a conclusion of all of this. So I got some more videos coming down the pipe. All right. As you listen to the paragraphs, and we're coming up on the meat now. As you listen to the paragraphs that have been harvested, keep in mind the overall theme along with the phrases used. The overall theme is a downward trend and never upward. They never cut the debt limit. And the phrases are debased. It would take a very little shift to get to cussing and devolve into the language of Mordor to accurately describe the situation. All right, here we go. These are overviews from the letter, paragraphs, to give you an idea how Treasury Secretaries over the past 14 years have been talking to Congress. I'm going to read this one again. It must be understood that the nation's creditworthiness is not a bargaining chip or a hostage that can be taken to advance any political agenda. It is an essential underpinning of our strength as a nation. Threatening to undermine our creditworthiness is no less irresponsible than threatening to undermine the rule of law, and no more legitimate than any other common demand for ransom. Timothy Geithner, January 14, 2013. Because Congress has always acted to increase the debt limit when necessary, and because failure to do so would be harmful to the interests of every American, I am confident Congress will act in a timely manner to increase the limit this year. However, for the benefit of members of Congress and the public, I want to make clear, for the record, what the implications of a default would be so there can be no misunderstanding when the issue is debated in the House and the Senate. Timothy Geithner, January 6, 2011. Commentary. This is the Secretary of the Treasury of the Great USA, Pax Americana, talking to Congress as if they were children, without an attention span capable of discerning when they are being talked to clearly and for the record. If Congress fails to increase the debt limit, it would cause severe hardship to American families, harm our global leadership position, and raise questions about our ability to defend our national interests. Janet Yellen, May 1st, 2023, fairly recently. The global economic leadership position enjoyed by the United States rests on the confidence of Americans and people around the world that we are a nation that keeps its promises, pays all of its bills in full and on time. Breaching that trust would do irreparable harm to the economy and the American people. Anyone going to point out that the theme of continually breaching the debt limit is breaching the trust also? And if we're going to keep our promises and pay all of our bills, has anyone thought about how we're going to pay back $34 trillion of what? Mighty flaky. Protecting the full faith and credit of the United States is the responsibility of Congress, because only Congress can extend a nation's borrowing authority. No Congress in our history has failed to meet that responsibility. It must be understood that the creditworthiness of the United States is an essential underpinning of our strength as a nation. It is not a bargaining chip to be used for partisan political ends. I want to re-emphasize what the President has said repeatedly regarding any threats to cause default in order to extract policy concessions from the administration. We will not negotiate over the debt limit. The creditworthiness of the United States is non-negotiable. The question of whether the country must pay obligations is already incurred is not open to debate. Congress has no choice but to protect our creditworthiness and our economy. Congress has no choice. Well, that is pretty explicit. Commentary. To raise the debt limit to accommodate more spending is facilitating spending. The debt limit is to curtail spending based on borrowing. So, I guess it's not beyond the realm of reason to understand that the Treasury Secretary is also self-interested and is begging, cajoling Congress to raise the debt limit, but they also are fudging the truth. Let's put it that way. Commentary. Apparently the creditworthiness of the United States is very negotiable. There is a property, an aspect, if you will, of a debt limit that is supposed to be non-negotiable. It is a threshold, a benchmark over which you shall not pass. It is absolutely meaningless, a nihilistic void, if every time the debt limit is approached, it is moved farther out. Let alone the fact that with the merciless extraordinary measures, they actually do spend more than what the debt limits set at. I mean, how much more debased can you possibly have than have a debt limit and you keep running up on it and then you go past it with merciless extraordinary measures and can't even hold to the number of the debt limit. And then you have commentary. The sheer insanity of paying government obligations, the bills, with Federal Reserve notes, which are also defined as obligations in the U.S. Code. Maybe the situation has reached a plateau where newspeak from 1984 can be employed, and we should refer to payments from the government as double plus obligations. And this is the law from the U.S. Code. The term obligation or other security of the United States includes all Federal Reserve notes. So if you have any Federal Reserve notes, you can't own them yourself. You're just in control of them while you're in possession of them. You can't own them like gold or silver because they are obligations of the United States. The current level of debt reflects the cumulative effect of all prior spending and tax decisions which have been made by administrations and Congresses of both parties over time. Failure to meet those obligations would cause irreparable harm to the U.S. economy and livelihoods of all Americans. Even the threat of failing to meet those obligations has caused detrimental impacts in the past, including the sole credit rating downgrade in the history of the nation in 2011. This is why no President or Treasury Secretary of either party has ever countenanced even a suggestion of a default on any obligation of the United States. Never countenanced even this suggestion. Never countenanced even the suggestion. What kind of mindless idiocy is that? These letters from the Secretary of Treasury are all specifically about countenancing the suggestion of a default. Raising the debt limit is a default of a kind, a default of principles and ethics. At that point, we expect Treasury would be left with very limited resources that would be depleted quickly. It is uncertain whether we would continue to meet all the nation's commitments after that date. Commentary. Is this serious or not serious? This sounds like something that might be newsworthy, like headline news, something to the effect, hey, the USA might go broke pretty quick, along with the value of the US dollar. I guess nobody would believe the news until it actually happens. I am writing to inform you that beginning on Thursday, January 19, 2023, the outstanding debt of the United States is projected to reach the statutory limit. Once the limit is reached, Treasury will need to start taking merciless, extraordinary measures to prevent the United States from defaulting on its obligations. Commentary. Hello! This sounds pretty serious, people. When the government of the USA starts to sound like propagandized banana republics using terms like merciless extraordinary measures, it is time to wake up. And don't get me started on catchphrases like quantitative easing. Consistent with past practice, I will, of course, continue to keep Congress informed as we approach the exhaustion of our resources. Commentary. Jesus fuzzing Christ. Is Yellen serious or not serious? So nonchalant. As we approach the exhaustion of our resources. Oh geez. So the great USA just exhausts its resources and then does what exactly? Yesterday, we issued an additional extraordinary measure that Treasury has employed in a number of past debt limit episodes. A swap of approximately $2 billion of Treasury Securities between a civil service, retirement, and disability fund and a federal financing bank. While this measure has not been used since 2015 due to its limited size, the extremely low level of remaining resources demands that I exhaust all available merciless extraordinary measures to avoid being unable to meet all of the government's commitments. Just move the furniture around. Now how does it look? You like? Just Byzantine. Defaulting on those legal obligations would cause severe hardship for American families. Read that again. Defaulting on those legal obligations would cause severe hardship for American families. Additionally, it would call into question the full faith and credit of the United States government, a pillar of the global financial system. The ensuing financial crisis from a default would have catastrophic economic consequences, potentially including the loss of millions of American jobs, and it would lead to higher borrowing costs, reduced retirement savings, and lower home values for families across the nation. Really, with the way Treasury debt limit, Treasury bonds, Federal Reserve notes, there is an understanding of what is going on. We're really not a savings-based economy. We're more of you have the currency, get it out there, buy stuff, keep things moving, and the social safety nets are your backup rather than your savings. It's if you have a whole bunch of Federal Reserve notes socked away, yeah, I think that would some serious thought should be given to that strategy. Suggestions that Congress could somehow evade responsibility for raising the debt limit by passing legislation to prioritize payments on the national debt above other legal obligations of the United States are simply not true. This would not prevent default, since it would seek to protect only principal and interest payments and not other legal obligations of the United States from non-payment. Adopting a policy that payments to investors should take precedence over other U.S. legal obligations would merely be default by another name, since the world would recognize it as a failure by the United States to stand behind its commitments. It would therefore bring about the same catastrophic economic consequences. Commentary. What does the world think about our failure to hold fast to the debt limit? In the long run, safety in the USA has to become more valuable than caring what the world thinks. The debate over the debt limit can seem very esoteric, but a failure to resolve it in the near term would have painful implications for people in every walk of American life. It would have a serious impact on members of the armed forces who depend on paychecks to feed and house their families, Social Security recipients who subsist on their monthly benefits, veterans who rely on the government for their retirement and health care needs, and small business owners or employees who provide goods and services to the country. In your letter, you suggest a debt limit should not be raised, and instead the federal debt be capped at the current limit. You further propose that after the government's borrowing authority is exhausted in August, the United States should, for some indefinite period, pay only the interest on its debt, while stopping or delaying payment of a broad swath of other commitments the country has made under the law. Commentary. Kinda certain that a federal debt limit is in itself supposed to be a cap. What kind of morons would not consider a limit a cap? I have expressed my concerns about this idea before, but I will restate them clear. This prioritization proposal advocates a radical and deeply irresponsible departure from the commitment by presidents of both parties throughout American history to honor all the commitments our nation has made. Commentary. What insanity reigns when suggesting respecting the debt limit can be construed as deeply irresponsible departure? The debt limit applies to past decisions of Congress. Increasing the debt limit is necessary to allow the United States to honor obligations previously authorized and appropriated by Congress. You explained this well in 2010, and this is the Treasury Secretary talking to, I believe, Jim DeMint. You explained this well in 2010 when you said, you don't have much choice if you charge something on your credit card. You have to pay it. And that's effectively what this debt limit is. We've already spent the money. The question is now, do we shut down the government or do we fund what we've already done? Commentary. Wrong. If you charge over your debt limit on your credit card, the charges are either rejected or you are charged a stiff penalty. Below is my sole credit card account info. It has a clear total credit line. That value has risen over the years, however, it is a real limit. I cannot go over that without the charges getting rejected or myself getting a fine. To suggest otherwise is to insult the audience's intelligence. And this is the interface, and there is the total credit line, $20,000. And that is my limit. I can't go over that. And I can request for that to be higher, but eventually they're going to say no. Commentary. This really is the balance on what the U.S. hinges every second of every day. The question is now, do we shut down the government or do we fund what we've already done? So the Treasury Secretary is telling Congress very clearly that if they don't raise the debt limit, the government is going to shut down. When Congress determines that certain commitments in the law should be altered or terminated, those decisions must be effectuated through enactment of legislation, not by attempting to coerce the Treasury to renege on existing legal commitments. Commentary. Woo-wee, that is a punch in the gut. Treasury slaps Congress upside the head. Treasury is trying to do its job. It knows that it has to sell Treasury bonds. In order to do that, that is debt, so they have to have the debt limit raised. But it is Congress. Congress is the one that says yes or no whether or not the debt limit can be raised. Congress is the one that says what can or cannot be money. And Congress is the one that deals with laws that can be altered or terminated through enactment of legislation, and the separation of power between Congress and the executive department. Treasury is kind of getting their back up there, not by attempting to coerce the Treasury. So maybe they were getting some pushback from Congress to Treasury to do something that Treasury didn't want to do. At its core, your letter is based on untested and unacceptably risky assumption that if the United States were to continue to pay interest on its debt, yet failed to pay legally required obligations to its citizens, servicemen and women, and businesses, there would be no adverse market reaction and no damage to the full faith and credit of the United States. Again, this idea is starkly at odds with the judgment of every previous administration, regardless of party, that has faced debt limit impasses. Commentary. Once again, suggesting to honor the debt limit is twisted to become an unacceptable, risky assumption. Ultimately, the notion of prioritizing payments is futile because the debt limit must be increased regardless of which spending path is adopted. There is no credible budget plan under which a debt limit increase can be avoided. In addition, a failure to enact a timely increase in the limit would have a perverse effect of increasing the government's borrowing costs and worsening our fiscal challenges. Commentary. Look at the words used. Futile, no credible, perverse. That is a good way to describe what is going on. Perversion. This country now possesses the strongest credit in the world. The full consequences of a default, or even a serious prospect of default, by the United States are impossible to predict and awesome to contemplate. Commentary. We do? If we have the strongest credit, why are your sorry selves begging for the debt limit to be raised with the soft threat of dire consequences if it is not raised? On the cool, it sounds like a shakedown. You'll do this, or else it won't go well for you. Again, Treasury estimates are subject to inherent variability and could change as we receive additional information about daily receipts, investments, and expenditures. Over the last several weeks, the trend in our projected net resources has been negative, which has reduced the amount of time that we expect to be able to finance the government. Commentary. Talk about living on a high wire. To remove these unnecessary and avoidable threats, I respectfully urge Congress to take action as soon as possible and raise the debt limit well before Treasury exhausts its merciless extraordinary measures. Commentary. So having a debt limit is an unnecessary and avoidable threat. To condense that, having a debt limit is a threat. Senator Chuck Grassley, the former ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, made the point well when he said in 2007, increasing the debt limit is necessary to preserve the full faith and credit of the United States. Without an increase in the debt limit, our government would face a choice between breaking the law by exceeding the debt limit or breaking faith with the investors by defaulting on debt. Neither of those choices is acceptable, and we have never done them. Critics sometimes object to raising the debt limit on grounds that it would allow the government to borrow more money. But refusing to raise the debt limit is akin to refusing to pay your individual credit card bill after you've already gone shopping and bought something. We cannot pass tax bills and spending bills and then refuse to pay our bills. The time to control the debt is when we are voting on bills that actually create the debt. Raising the debt limit is about meeting the obligations we've already incurred. It is that simple. We must meet our obligations. Commentary. That sucks. If the USA does not raise the debt limit, there are two bad choices. And really, raising the debt limit whenever the national debt looks to run over is a slime ball move. One hair's breadth away from breaking the law. Commentary. No, the restrictions on private credit cards are real. The purchase would be declined, or a severe penalty for overdrawn would occur. Commentary. No one wants to hear what Congress should do. Congress is there to do, to govern real people with real lives, not to engage in fantasy or utopianism. If the debt limit is reached and Treasury is no longer able to issue federal debt, federal spending would have to be decreased, or federal revenue would have to be increased by a corresponding amount to cover the gap in what cannot be borrowed. To put this in context, the federal government would have to eliminate all spending on discretionary programs, cut nearly 70% of outlays for mandatory programs, increase revenue collection by nearly 2/3, or take some combination of these actions in the second half of fiscal year 2011, April through September 30th, 2011, in order to avoid increasing the debt limit. Additional spending cuts and/or revenue increases would be required under current policy in fiscal year 2012 and beyond to avoid increasing the debt limit. Commentary. That is a very concise description of the issue. Commentary. The federal revenues would have to be increased means increased taxation. Commentary. In truth, this borrowing is hiding the fact if everything was paid by federal revenue, taxes would be much, much higher. They would start to reach the percentage where you will owe nothing since you are taxed of everything. Commentary. Increased revenue collection by nearly 2/3. Good to see them admit this. This means a 2/3 increase in taxes. Actually, this is a definitive number, though I expect it is very low, of what a default would mean for American citizens. 2/3 increase in taxes. Probably be a lot more. Now take this as, mathematically, you have it in like communist countries. They do work, they have value in their work, but since they own nothing and they get paid, in theory, nothing, what that means is they are taxed 100%. 0% no taxes. If you're taxed 100%, you own nothing because everything is taken away from you. So a 2/3 increase in taxes just gives you some perspective. None of those budget policy choices is feasible or responsible. As a consequence, given that Congress has imposed on itself the requirement for periodic increases, there is no alternative to enactment of an increase in a debt limit. I'm going to read that again. None of those budget policy choices is feasible or responsible. As a consequence, given that Congress has imposed on itself the requirement for periodic increases, there is no alternative to enactment of an increase in a debt limit. Commentary. Given that Congress has imposed on itself the requirement for periodic increases. That is bizarre. The Treasury Secretary sounds like he is blaming Congress for their setting a requirement, aka debt limit, along with the arrogant presumption that automatically implies a periodic increase as if there was no option. In a backhanded way, the Treasury Secretary, and probably the only person in the USA, is construing that Congress has morals, ethics, standards, and propriety by saying Congress has imposed on itself the requirement. Along with that goes the snakish insinuation that Congress should not impose on itself and just let Treasury do whatever it wants. That phrase, there is no alternative, either means what it states or else the Treasury Secretary is telling a lie. As you know, the debt limit is the total amount of money that the United States government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, including Social Security and Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest on national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. Commentary. The absurdity of the situation is mind-numbing. The government collects taxes, which as a population is 100% of itself. Then a portion of that is allotted to be refunded to the people, and the government no longer has that money since it presumably spent as soon as the people sent the tax payment in. So it has to sell treasury bonds on the full faith and credit of the United States to provide those refunds. And if the debt limit is too close so as to disallow the selling of treasury bonds, the debt limit must be increased. What level of abandonment and fiscal irresponsibility could surpass what is going on? Maybe I shouldn't ask that. They probably can get worse. Your letter asks me to detail how long or how great of a debt limit increase the administration is seeking. Only Congress can authorize an increase in the nation's borrowing authority, and therefore Congress must choose how long to extend a debt limit. A longer period of certainty would help protect our economy from future political brinkmanship. If Congress fails to meet its responsibility, however, it would be catastrophic for the financial markets, the ongoing economic recovery, and the jobs and savings of millions of Americans. I have a responsibility to be transparent with the American people about these risks, and I think it would be a great mistake to discount or dismiss them. For these reasons, I have repeatedly urged Congress to take action immediately. Commentary. Smack! The Treasury Secretary put that right back on Congress, where the problem should be resolved. Again, this problem has nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. If we had a $1 trillion public debt limit, the Federal Reserve would be in its box where it belongs. Commentary. If it is such a great mistake to discount or dismiss the risks, why isn't the American public aware of this situation? It seems like, I know money is not supposed to be everything in your life, but generally when you're walking around, you do have some mental awareness of how much money you have, how much it's going to cost to do the things that you want to do, and to have all this going on in our country is not a good thing. So what do you think of these alarming paragraphs? Now compare them with these thoughts. If a profit is a positive markup, then can you take a real and true profit with a debt note? Where is the military-industrial complex in the conversations between the Treasury Secretary and Congress? They are obscured, though they are there, tucked under line items. Who is not obscured? The civil servants and postal workers. All the alphabet soup agencies are categorized as civil servants, and the letters make it clear, very clear, that their pensions will be repaid with interest when and not if the debt limit is raised. I showed that in the script for subsequent videos I'm going to be making. They weren't predominant in the excerpts that I culled for this video, but they are overwhelmingly, and again, all the alphabet soup agencies are tucked under civil servants. They are front and center at the feed trough. Nancy Reagan, just say no. Well, I know that's about drugs, but the Secretary is making it clear. As soon as Congress says no, just one time, we're going to be in for a hard ride. All the illegal immigration coming into the USA, with this being said about the debt limit, are the immigrants aware they're coming to a country where the party might be ending? For all the haters of America, the Treasury Secretary is clearly telling everyone exactly how to bring the USA to a screeching halt. Just have Congress say no to raising the debt limit, and let's let everything shake out. No conspiracy, no outside influence, no subversion, no terrorism, no civil war. Just have Congress say no. We will not raise the debt limit any further, and let's see what happens. You don't want the USA to give bombs to Ukraine, Israel, or leave military equipment in Afghanistan and Iraq? Just tell Congress to say no to raising the debt limit. You don't want pork going to every representative and senator's constituency? Then make it clear to them that they are to say no to raising the debt limit. You don't want buku socialist programs propping everyone up from the cradle to the grave? Have Congress say no to raising the debt limit. We'll get back to agriculture and husbandry right quick, where we should be rooted. How is all our money being based on debt, representative of the concept of private property? With debt notes, exactly 1/2 of every transaction is anti-private property. What is the collateral behind the full faith and credit of the USA? Our military's power? The land? The people? The things? The overriding theme and conclusion is that if Congress ever decides to reject the Treasury Secretary's pleas to raise the debt limit, then significant harm will be done. So in order to avoid the harm, Congress is impelled to acquiesce to the pleas and allow for more debt. Please, can we have access to more debt and Federal Reserve notes? It won't go well for you if you say no. Don't make me use merciless extraordinary measures. I will tell the civil servants and their alphabet soup agencies and the postal workers on you. And you know they won't be happy. And don't worry, we understand. When and not if you raise the debt limit, the pensions will be restored with interest, too. Poor beggars at best, domestic enemies at worst.